Hey, I just wanted to make a quick video. I was going to post some pictures to our group, but I am learning a few things and I don't know if pictures are the best way, so I thought I'd try to make a video and use my Panasonic camera to see how well the video turns out. Anyways, I'm printing a case for a power supply. I bought a Rudeng, a Chinese boost buck converter power supply thing off eBay because I had seen it in some YouTube videos, and someone had on Thingiverse, they had kind of a file already that fit the display correctly, so I modified a little bit for my 2-post connectors, and I modified the back. It took out the AC connector because I'm just using an old power supply from an old Apple laptop here, so to power the thing. Anyways, yesterday you guys may have seen my post. Excuse my crappy video skills. You may have seen my post about warping. You can see that the corners all pulled up. This was the on the bed side, obviously that side down. You can see how that warped, pulled up pretty good. I mean, almost, by the time it was done, it was almost 1/4 of an inch, maybe not quite that bad, 1/8 of an inch anyways. So I'm printing another one today. This is the top side, and this has not peeled from all the corners yet. It is peeling from that back corner, starting to pull up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that very well. Anyways, what I ran into was that it laid down some awesome layers to begin with. I also adjusted back to the warping. I increased the bed temperature 5 degrees to see if that would make any difference. And I also ended up readjusting my Z height offset. I backed it off a little bit because I realized I was pushing my filament down pretty hard, and so I laid 3 beautiful layers. This is 3 top, 3 bottom, 2 shells, and 15% infill. So when it was starting the infill, the default Slick 3R for my Prusa edition is basically triangular, I think, and I always forget about that. And when it lays triangular infill down, it lays basically lines in 3 directions, and when you get done, if you were to cut that part apart and look at the infill, it would essentially be cubes, the way it ends up, because it offsets the lines every layer. But when it lays the 3 direction of lines, it lays them all in the same layer. So what happens is it lays over top of the line twice, essentially, for 1 layer. And of course it drags the head over to the nozzle over that, and you get this horrible sound. And if it's small parts, it can, pull the part off the bed. You run into all kinds of things. And I don't know what you guys use for standard infill. I had started to use honeycomb more often, but I forget because the Slick 3R defaults to triangular, and if I don't remember to change that setting, if you listen, you'll hear that as it's doing that infill, you'll hear it dragging over the lines. Anyways, I try to use the honeycomb, but it's not set up as default, so I don't always remember to change that. So I just thought I'd bring that up and see what you guys use for infill as your standard, because that triangular does not make sense to me that it would have to drag the nozzle over top of those the lines you just laid down on the same layer. So, yeah, that brings me to my main thing that I wanted to talk about was alright, there you can probably hear that dragging over those lines. I'll try to get one more little quick snap and then I'll talk about that main. Okay, moving on. Look at those lines. So it laid that infill really crappy. It didn't stick down. It was horrible. I've never had infill end up like that, and it just ended up as spaghetti on the infill. But I paused the print. I went in and cut off most of the loose stuff with some snips and was able to kind of recover. And it laid down the first bridging layer, the first layer on top of that infill. Okay, you know, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't flat because of course it's missing in some spots and bubbled up in others because of how crappy it was. Then it laid the second layer on top of that really nice. Then when it went to lay this third layer, instead of starting at a corner like it did on all the other layers, like what it usually does for me on big parts, it started in the center here. Started right about there. And those layers weren't sticking down to the previous layer right there. And of course, when they don't stick down, the next line sticks to it, and then you just end up with a big flap that's not stuck down. And I realized it, so you can see there how it's shiny. That next set of dull layers, I turned the fan completely off, the cooling fan, the part fan, completely off, and it stuck down. So I turned the fan back on just as a test, and you can see it started to not stick again. So I turned it back off for that next section, and I played around with completely off and 50% and blah blah blah. I don't know if you guys have ever ran into that. I have before once in a while, but never to the degree as bad as it was here. And if I hadn't been sitting here, I'm sure it would have turned out, you know, the part would have turned out, but it just would have been crappy. That's the inside of this power supply, so who cares, right? But there's something to learn from it. And I think the other thing that was happening was the cooling fan blows from the front here. And because it started in the center, started here, and then working its way to this corner, that cooling fan was blowing underneath those layers that weren't stuck down, and I think it was actually making it a little worse. I don't know the solution for it yet. I just, you know, like I said, I happened to be here. I was able to turn that cooling fan off. I turned it back on. We're not going to get a shot of it here for a minute. I turned it back on for this corner up here, and you know, played around, and of course when it didn't stick, if I turned it completely off, it'll stick down. Interesting that those layers where the fan is completely off are dull, as that cools more slowly than with the fan on. So that's just interesting to me that when the cooling fan is on, that you get that shine. And by the way, this is 3D Cellutech black. It's their black, and I've had pretty good luck with this filament before, so I don't think it's filament. I think, can you hear that dragging over its own? It doesn't make sense. It's not right. So anyways, my camera's about to run out of juice, but I just wanted to make this video instead of posting comments and pictures, and see if you guys have any feedback, or if this is, I don't know if there's anything in here that's helpful. Maybe we can put some puzzle pieces together and figure out how to solve some of this. But anyways, signing off.